Mario Kart 64, the second installment of the Mario Kart series and the first game in the series to use three-dimensional graphics. It was released in 1996 in Japan and was quite a big hit, selling almost 10 million copies. However, since it's the first 3D game in the series, there was a lot of trial and error. This means tons of unused content and features. Let's start with some unused coding they made for all kinds of features that didn't end up in the game. First up, track scaling function. Next to the mirror mode flag in memory is a floating point value that appears to always be set to 1. When a track is loaded, its height is scaled by this amount. This value only affects track polygons, and hit detection is not altered to compensate for the steeper hills and/or shorter vertical walls. So changing it often produces unplayable tracks and strange effects such as floating trees, low areas being considered underwater or out of bounds, and walls that are no longer solid. No similar scaling functions exist for the X and Z axis. This may have been intended as a debugging function to test slopes, or a bonus mode that would allow scale tracks to various sizes. It's kind of weird, but it would have been a fun feature. It just allows you to alter the map quite a lot in terms of size. Another removed feature is the vertical split screen. This unused display for two-player mode is only accessible via the debug menu. It's pretty clear why this isn't accessible normally. It's unfinished. The lap counter still displays in battle mode, the map goes over the second player's lap counter, and no Vs and Es come out when drifting in race mode. This was probably removed as the field of view per player was rather limited and wouldn't work on normal 4x3 screens. This decision might have been made during testing of the co-op in the game. Well, it's the most logical to us at least. Overall, they kept using this setup for most games, but with Mario Kart 8, they went to the vertical display as the 16:9 format left more space for each player to see on the screen.
Now for a removed feature, the lightning in battle mode. When used, the lightning bolt makes all other players lose one balloon. However, it isn't normally possible to obtain this item, likely because it would have made battles horribly unbalanced. Yet again, is something they probably removed after some testing, and it's quite logical they did this because, like I said, it would have been quite unfair if one player could just take 3 balloons at once. Also, they were planning to add bomb warnings. This is an unused multiplayer feature that warns players when they approach the moving bombs on the track. Now, why they removed this is unknown, but it's likely that they did this because it would have been less of a surprise if a player runs into one. Since it pops up quite easily, it would give you too much time to avoid bombs on the tracks, or even to avoid the ghost player who was defeated at one point. There is also an interesting feature called Feather Jump. If you think for just a second, you might be able to guess what it was. The player state code contains a flag indicating whether a large feather jump state or a small feather jump state are active. This is probably a leftover from the plant feather item from Super Mario Kart. However, it wasn't included in the final game, though it can be seen in certain pre-release material. The reason why they didn't finish it is unknown. It could be because of time constraints or the player being able to skip too large parts of tracks. Now, the next one isn't a removed one from the game, and they actually fully programmed a part of it, but they didn't do the second half. The game contains 6 tables that determine the item probabilities when hitting an item box. The first 2 tables are both for Grand Prix mode and determine the item probabilities for a human player and a CPU player respectively. According to the latter, CPU players have a certain chance to get green shells, both the single and the triple variety. But the CPUs never use shells at all, so this isn't actually ever seen in gameplay. So they did program for the CPU that they could get it, but then they didn't finish the part where they are supposed to use them. Now, why the CPUs don't use shells is unknown. Nintendo never explained that. However, it is likely that this was never implemented as it would have collided with the rubber band mechanic the CPUs use to keep up with the player. If the player is in the lead, the CPUs get faster. If they exceed a certain amount of speed, they would be likely to hit themselves with the shells. But we're just theorizing here. Obviously, time might be another factor, since we can see in other Mario Kart games like Mario Kart 8 that the CPUs do use shells. Chances are that they just didn't have enough time to test and optimize the shell's behavior under certain speeds and left it out altogether.
Now they also changed one of the graphics, and actually quite an important one, since you see it at the start of a race. The traffic light. There's actually an early version of it that looks a bit different. There used to be a border around it with white and black stripes. We don't know why they removed it. Getting rid of it doesn't drastically change anything. So maybe they thought it was ugly and it needed to be more simplistic. Now, besides removed stuff, there was also a little mistake that Nintendo made in the game. Now, it doesn't break it, but it's still a bit odd. Hidden underneath the big donut arena are 2 misplaced item boxes. These item boxes can be seen by getting the camera behind the green bars and waiting. Eventually, the 2 item boxes will float up into view. Now, they ended up there most likely on accident. They weren't placed for a reason, and this actually happens quite a lot in video games. Almost every video game on the planet had some misplaced or forgotten stuff. It's almost always out of view, since otherwise they would have seen it and removed it. Mario Kart 64 was the first ever 3D Mario Kart game, and also an extremely popular one. And it certainly went through some changes. Some good and some not. But hey, they did end up making a great game for all of us to enjoy. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to watch more videos, click the annotations on the screen right now. And if you subscribe, then apparently you'll stay up to date with all our videos? That sounds pretty cool, right?